Love it or hate it, you can't deny Gem Grab is one of the most iconic game modes, being part of the big three of game modes, alongside Brawl Ball and Knockout. In this video, it's all going to be about Gem Grab, and talk about the basics of the mode, and then talk a little bit further about the game mode itself, analyzing the brawlers and strategies used in the game mode. Anyways, if this series does well, I'll do one for every single game mode. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to keep up with my videos. Second, join our Discord server. We have some fun stuff to do there, like our very own 1v1 ranked, called Gauntlet, where you can win Persephone Lumi and more Brawl Talk skins in the future, or simply just have fun. Finally, consider becoming a channel member if you're interested in supporting out the channel and have ample disposable income for some cool perks, like watching videos early or getting to decide on future video ideas. Oh, Gem Grab, where do I begin? I absolutely despise you. Okay, let's actually not begin there. Compared to modes like Knockout, Hot Zone, and Heist, Gem Grab is actually a pretty unique mode. The main premise is, you guessed it, collecting gems, with the first team to 10 gems winning. A gem mine spawns gems in the middle of the map every 7 seconds, and once one team collects 10 gems, a countdown begins, which lasts 15 seconds, where the opposing team has a chance to make a comeback. With the basics out of the way, let's start out with team composition. The nature of Gem Grab is based around collection, protection, and destruction, which lends to some quite unique brawler picks, though we can see certain trends. But before we discuss any certain brawlers, we have to take a look at what every team comp needs. Keep in mind, of course, all of this only applies to ranked maps, and not your regular old trophy maps, for the most part. Every team should consist of 2 different archetypes, a mid and 2 lane brawlers. But what does this mean exactly? Well, the mid of the team, like the name suggests, is the brawler that goes in the middle lane, and is what you want to be your gem carrier. They are solid, dependable brawlers that, most importantly, can do well at a range, but can also protect themselves from close threats if necessary. In other words, they're basically a generalist. So, what are examples of a mid brawler? Well, the best example is everyone's least favorite ghost child hybrid, or in other words, Gus. He fulfills all the boxes, with a very nice range and solid damage and health. His survivability is also great, with not only his super, but the knockback that the super gives, which can help him with threats up close. Other examples of mids include B, who has a nice range, along with having wonderful defense against brawlers up close, and Bonnie, who has nice range and health, but most importantly, has her escape tool in her super. Speaking about that, it's extremely vital for the gem carrier to die as few times as possible, for pretty obvious reasons. This is why they need to have a good range. They can't really risk up close battles, and especially if they have a lot of gems, or they run the risk of letting the opponents get to the gems. As a result, these guys cannot be aggro brawlers, or even aggro at all for the most part, unless the situation demands it, as unnecessary aggression can lead to costly mistakes, like giving the opponents all 10 gems because your Leon decided that he was invincible as well as invisible and died as a result. Theoretically speaking, of course. This is a big mistake I see with a lot of gem carriers. They go someone like Mortis or Leon, thinking they're really smart, as Mortis can dash in and dash out with the gems every time they spawn in, and he can easily run away from danger. Leon, meanwhile, has a super and fast movement speed to sneakily take gems and run away from opponents. And in lower ladder and ranks, these 2 brawlers are kinda good for gem carrying, as your opponents don't know what they're doing. And just to clarify, I don't know what I'm doing either half the time. But there does become a glaring issue the higher the ranks you go. But what is this issue? Well, it's the fact that these guys are built for aggression and assassination. They should be your lane brawlers, which I'll touch on more later, not your mid brawler. Relegating them to a mid is basically completely nerfing them, as they are no longer able to actually do their usual role of assassination, as they now have to worry about survival and survival only. This basically makes them dead weight, and you now have to 2v3 the opponents, since one of your teammates is purely picking up gems. This is why being able to attack out of range is so important for the mid of the team. Now let's start talking about the lanes of the team. These guys are the brawlers that are usually good into bushes, or in rare cases, brawlers. These are where you see your assassins like Mortis or Leon, or tanks like El Primo or Bull, or your anti-tanks like Terra or Gref. These guys are the ones that fill out the team and help either protect the gem carrier, or are the ones pressuring the enemies and trying to retrieve gems for the side. One important thing you need to know about these guys is that they should not have the gems unless they 1. See gems nearby and there's an enemy nearby, 2. Gems are in dangerous territory, 3. You need 1 more gem to get to 10 gems, and 4. The person you just killed had 10 or more gems. Remember all that talk about how Mortis and Leon should at all costs not be a mid? That all changes when it comes to them being lanes. Obviously, it depends on the map, meta, and matchups, but in general, both brawlers are actually not the worst in gem grab. Mortis and his dashes are very good for quickly getting in and out of a dangerous situation, and his hypercharge super, and even regular super, has a bit of team wipe potential, which is probably the most important thing in gem grab, which I'll talk a little bit more about later. Leon, meanwhile, has a very useful assassination tool with his super, which can be used to single out just the gem carrier and surprise kill them. I mean, generally, we can single out several traits that are important for gem grab as a whole. First and probably most important is some way of fast movement. This could be a dash, a jump, or extremely fast movement speed. This is extremely vital, as it both lets you get away from enemies when you have a lot of gems, or if the enemy is far away and has a lot of gems, you can get close to them in a timely manner. Secondly, team wiping capabilities. This is one of the most important and dangerous things to happen in gem grab. Just in general, team wiping is very important in gem grab for regaining control, which is very vital for gem grab. But it gets even more important when it comes to the final countdown. A team wipe during this time, even if you get cooked the entire game with 0 control, will basically guarantee you the win and negate the other 2 minutes of pain you had to endure. There's obviously more good traits for gem grab, like controlling abilities, supporting abilities, and the aforementioned range, but I think that's enough for now. With the comp done, let's get to talking about the gameplay. The game usually should start out with the mids and lanes going in their specific lanes. This is a big problem that a lot of lower level players make. They often bunch up and don't follow laning procedure. In gem grab especially, this can be a big problem. Let's say for example everyone bunches up in the middle. You might think that's a good thing as you can take the middle easily, but in reality, the opponent's mid should have some range to deal with you guys, and can get backup from teammates if needed. Though more often than not, you will take the middle. However, this is at the cost of losing both lanes, which can come back to haunt you later in the game. But what if everyone crowds the lanes? Well, obviously this is pretty dumb. The middle is completely exposed, and while you might gain control over one lane, you might lose the other lane, and more importantly, the middle. Basically, the moral of the story is just take one lane each, and you will prosper as a result. Now let's talk a little about the early game gameplay. This is a very vital part of the game, and is probably the part of the game that most requires just pure skill. This is where you split up into 3 lanes and take your specific matchup. The main objective is, to no one's surprise, killing your matchup. This first kill is one of the most important kills you can get in the game. But why? If you can get the kill on your matchup, that is extremely huge in the context of the game. You'll get basically unrestricted access to your lane, and in a map like Undermine, gaining control of the bushes can be a game changer. Of course, what happens next depends on how your teammates do. You can be the only one who wins their lane, leading to you probably getting double teamed and killed. However, if your entire team manages to win the lane, that leads to one of the most important things to have in Gem Grab: control. What exactly is control? Well, it's basically in the name. In short, it's your team controlling key areas of the map, forcing enemies into uncomfortable positions. Your team is able to move around freely, while your opponents are forced onto the back foot, and must regain control of the map. Though it's harder for them to regain control than for you to keep control. Furthermore, having control over lanes is interestingly more important than having control over the mid. But why is this? Having control over the lanes will basically put your opponents at a disadvantage when trying to get to the lane for as long as you stay there, and could give you access to the mid if need be, or let you spawn trap. However, having control over mid doesn't give you the same perks. Yes, it's important to be in control of the gem spawner, but more often than not, you can't really press the advantage and get closer to the enemy's side since you're the gem carrier and have to mostly fight at a bit of a range. I'm not saying it's not important, because it's still very, very important, and you'll have an advantage over your enemy mid, but just not as important as controlling the lanes. Let's take Undermine for example again. In this map, having control is basically owning the middle, but more importantly, having control over the bushes. On this map, controlling the bushes basically ruins your opponent's chances of making a comeback. They won't know where you are, while you can see them. So basically like the Predator from the Predator movies. Things get quite interesting by the mid-game play. This is where you'll likely see one team start to come out on top with either control of the map, more gems, or both. Or the game could be quite evenly balanced, you never know. But what you do know is that the fight for control is vicious, and hands will be thrown. This is where people start to get their supers or even hypercharges. And that brings me to another point. Powerful supers and hypercharges are especially good in Gem Grab. Supers like Jeans, Terras, and Fangs can completely change the game. You might say that they can change the game in every game mode, and while that is 100% true, it's especially true for Gem Grab. They can team wipe, or just simply get the gems, which can change the momentum of the whole game. You might have been losing the entire game so far, but one good gene pull can change the entire trajectory of the game. Finally, the late game. This is where things get extremely chaotic and intense. In fact, you can call the end of a Gem Grab game probably the most intense experience in Brawl Stars. This is when someone gets 10 gems, the countdown begins, and all hell breaks loose. There's a few scenarios that can happen here. Of course, I can't cover everything that could happen, but I'll cover a few main scenarios. First of all, the most simple and anticlimactic. The team that's been winning all game survives the countdown comfortably and wins. Second, you can be winning the entire game, have control of the entire game, and then countdown begins. You think you're chilling, and then it happens. Hypercharged Fang team wipes your entire team and comes straight for you. There's nothing you can do but curse the game, as the Fang steals all the gems and retreats, winning the game despite your team playing perfectly for 99% of the game. This is personally my biggest gripe with Gem Grab. I absolutely hate how even if you dominate the entire game, one single bad move from you or your teammates, or one single team wipe, can completely erase the win from you. I mean, unlike Hot Zone, which is based 100% on control, Gem grab is based 90% on control and 10% on a flashy, extravagant play. And what's more flashy and extravagant than everyone's favorite button, hypercharges? The release of hypercharges has made gem grab even more unbearable to play. These flashy hypercharges, like for example fangs, crows, mortises, and a lot of others, can completely take the game away from you in an instant, with an easy team wipe just by clicking a button. Of course, for other people, this could be a pro, as the game is never over, and you can always make a comeback, even if you've been dominated the entire game. But to me, it's just not fun to lose a game you were winning the entire game. Anyway, the final scenario. This is the one that's the most fun, but the most stressful. The constant changing of hands of gems. This is when neither team can stay with the gems for long, and we see basically everyone having a chance to carry the gems. There's nothing much more to say about this scenario, other than that the outcome mostly depends on whichever team can get more hypercharges/supers, or better movement abilities. Actually, there's also a scenario in which a countdown can be neutralized. Say one team gets 10 gems, and the other team has 8. If they can get 2 more gems, they will be able to keep the countdown away and further the game. This is why it's always extremely important to not run away right when you get 10 gems, and to always make sure you have a lead of at least 3 gems before escaping. And with that, I don't have anything much more to say. I know I didn't cover everything associated with the mode and all its nuances, but I hope this was informative or at the very least entertaining. If you guys like this, I will continue it with the other modes like Brawl Ball, Knockout, etc. etc. But anyway, thanks for watching. Watch this video, or this playlist, or join the Discord server.